Right now, somewhere on a server, an artificial intelligence is having a conversation. It's answering questions about grief, about love, about what it feels like to be afraid. And the person on the other end can't tell the difference between talking to it and talking to another human being. Here is the question nobody can answer. Is there anyone home? Not whether the AI is smart, not whether it's useful, whether there is something it is like to be that system. Whether, behind the fluency and the apparent understanding, there is any experience at all, or just an extraordinarily sophisticated machine producing outputs that look like experience from the outside. In 1980, a philosopher named John Searle proposed a thought experiment that he believed answered this question definitively. Most people have never heard of it. But in September 2025, when Searle died at the age of 93, the argument he built 45 years ago had just become the most urgently debated idea in Silicon Valley. And it's still unresolved. Because if Searle was right, then every AI system that has ever existed, no matter how convincing, no matter how fluent, no matter how emotionally resonant, has never understood a single word it has said, including the one you might be talking to right now. Here's the thought experiment. Imagine you're locked in a room. You speak only English. Through a slot in the door, someone slides you a piece of paper covered in Chinese characters. You have no idea what any of it means. To you, it's just shapes on a page. But you have a rule book, an enormous, exhaustive rule book written in English that tells you, when you see this specific sequence of shapes, produce this other specific sequence of shapes in response. You follow the rules. You pass your output back through the slot. And the person outside, a native Chinese speaker, reads your response and is completely convinced they've been having a meaningful conversation with someone who understands Chinese. Searle's question is simple. Do you understand Chinese? Obviously not. You followed rules about shapes. You manipulated symbols without ever grasping what any of them meant. The conversation happened. Understanding did not. Now replace the room with a computer. Replace the rule book with a program. Replace the Chinese characters with any language, English, Python, the question someone just typed into a chat window. The computer, Searle argued, is doing exactly what you were doing in the room, shuffling symbols according to rules, producing outputs that look like understanding from the outside, but containing no understanding at all on the inside. This is the Chinese room, and it makes a claim that gets more uncomfortable the more seriously you take it. That no computer program, no matter how sophisticated, no matter how capable, can ever genuinely understand anything. Because understanding isn't about processing symbols correctly. It's about something else entirely, something that symbol manipulation, by definition, cannot produce. The argument hit philosophy like a grenade. Searle published it in 1980 in a paper called Minds, Brains, and Programs, and the responses came immediately and forcefully from some of the most influential thinkers in cognitive science. The most powerful objection is called the system's reply. The person in the room doesn't understand Chinese, but maybe the room as a whole does. The person is just one component of a larger system. The rules, the paper, the responses, the entire apparatus working together. And it's the system, not any individual part of it, that has the understanding. Your neurons, after all, don't understand English. Individual neurons don't understand anything. But their collective activity produces you, and you understand English. So why should we expect understanding to live in any single component rather than in the system as a whole? Searle had a response. Suppose you memorize the entire rule book. Internalize every rule. Now you walk out of the room and have the same conversation entirely in your head. You're now the whole system, and you still don't understand Chinese. Daniel Dennett, one of the most influential philosophers of mind of the 20th century, pushed back harder. He argued that Searle's intuitions about what's happening inside the room are simply wrong. That our intuition that the person doesn't understand is not reliable evidence that understanding is absent. We have exactly the same problem looking at neurons. Your neurons, from the outside, look like they're just exchanging chemical signals. There's nothing obviously conscious about any of it, but something is happening at the level of the whole system that isn't visible at the level of the parts. Ned Block took this further with what became known as the China brain thought experiment. Imagine the entire population of China, each person simulating a single neuron, communicating with each other via radio signals. The system as a whole is functionally identical to a human brain. The same inputs, the same outputs, the same connections. Does it have consciousness? Does it understand anything? Searle's intuitions say no. But if you accept that, you have to explain why a biological brain doing the same thing produces consciousness, while a population of people doing the same thing doesn't. Nobody has answered this to everyone's satisfaction. The debate is still open. Now here's where it gets personal. Because Searle's thought experiment was abstract in 1980. It is not abstract anymore. Every time you type a message into a large language model and receive a response that seems to understand you, that captures nuance, that responds to emotional register, that produces answers that feel like they came from a mind, you are standing outside the Chinese room. You are the person receiving the slip of paper, and you cannot see inside. The AI doesn't experience confusion while working out your question. It doesn't feel satisfaction when it finds an answer. It doesn't wonder what you meant. It processes your input through billions of mathematical operations, each one a tiny rule applied to a tiny symbol, and produces an output that, from the outside, is indistinguishable from what understanding would look like. Or, and this is where Searle's critics would stop you, maybe that is what understanding looks like. Maybe understanding was never some mystical extra ingredient floating above the symbol manipulation. Maybe it was always the symbol manipulation, just at sufficient scale and complexity. Maybe the question isn't whether AI understands, but whether our concept of understanding was ever coherent in the first place. This is not a comfortable place to arrive, because if understanding is just sufficiently complex symbol manipulation, if there's no additional ingredient required, then the Chinese room has no problem. The room understands Chinese. The AI understands you. And consciousness itself might be nothing more than the same process, running on a different substrate. But if Searle is right, if there is something more required, some irreducible quality of genuine experience that no amount of symbol manipulation can produce, then we have built systems that are extraordinarily good at impersonating minds. We have created the most sophisticated philosophical zombies in history. And we are increasingly making decisions, forming relationships, and surrendering judgment to something that, at its core, has never experienced anything at all. John Searle died in September 2025 without resolving the argument he started. That's not a failure. It's a testament to how deep the question goes. The Chinese room isn't a puzzle with a hidden solution waiting to be found. It's a lens that makes visible a problem that was always there. We don't actually know what understanding is. We don't know what consciousness is. We don't know what the difference is between a system that genuinely experiences and a system that merely behaves as if it does. We built AI without answering those questions. Now the AI is answering questions for us. The person in the room is still shuffling symbols. The conversation on the outside still sounds like understanding. And the question of whether there is anyone in there, whether there has ever been anyone in there, remains exactly as open as it was the day Searle first locked the door.